Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome back. Sean Light Podcast here, episode number 316. Episode 316, coming at you live. And I'm going to start this podcast episode out with a little story. Now, when I first got into the world of strength and conditioning, my first job ever was with the Arizona Diamondbacks. I was a minor league strength and conditioning coach. Now, when I arrived at spring training for the first time out in Scottsdale, I was showing up there as green can be. I had a journalism degree. I had no background. They had asked me to read Anatomy Trains by Thomas Myers before I got there. And I thought, like old Sean, basketball playing, college basketball playing, academic Sean, thought that he could read that book on the flight out to Scottsdale. And I'm on the plane and I'm trying to read the book. And for those of you who have read it, that book is ridiculously dense in the beginning of the book. And I don't even know that I got through the first chapter. I think the first chapter is easy, and the second one, they start going like physiology and like cells and the actual structure of the fascia. And it was so wildly over my head. I had no chance. I ended up closing it and say, I'm going to do what I've always done, and I'm just going to wing it. And that's what I did. So I get out to Arizona, and all these guys out there are just so smart. Right? Like these guys are strength and conditioning coaches and massage therapists. The athletic trainers are like just brilliant, and they're doing all sorts of crazy stuff. And they're talking about this and they're talking about that and anatomy. We took anatomy quizzes like once a week. And I remember being in the end of the day meetings, and it was so like nerve wracking for me because I didn't want anybody to call me. What they would do is they would go around and they would ask everyone. They'd have like a list of the injured players, the guys who were on the injury report, and they would talk about like how they were going to rehab them in the day, and then they would talk about how they would progress them inside of the weight room. And then the medical coordinator, he would go around and kind of call on people at random to see if they could give an answer to it. And it was great for development, stuff like that. But at the time, without knowing anything, it's really scary because I was embarrassed because I just didn't know anything about strength and conditioning or what to do. And I remember I would always just rephrase what the person right before me said. So I'm out in Arizona, and when we get there, really, their core philosophy at the time, I don't know what they're up to these days, but at the time, their core philosophy really revolved around PRI. And for those of you guys who are involved with the PRI science, like it's complicated and there's a lot of different layers to it. And somebody coming from a journalism degree, really green, brand new, and this might as well be speaking Chinese. Like I have no idea what they're saying. And like, it just seemed so wild and so complex. And the way that they would explain it really seemed to work. I saw some incredible results. I saw like really mind-blowing stuff. For those of you who don't know what PRI is the Postural Restoration Institute. As far as I'm concerned, best exercise science, rehab science stuff on the planet. They're located in Nebraska. Wonderful people out there. Really owe a lot of my success, at least in the strength and conditioning world, to them. And so what I did was I decided that I was going to start learning it. And I want you to kind of paint you a picture here of a young kid standing at the bottom of a mountain. Might as well have been Mount Everest, right? And I'm staring up at all of these different things that are involved in the PRI science. And they talked very, very intricate, detailed anatomy. They talked very neurosensory. We're talking about the visual system. We're talking about the auditory system. We're talking about fascia, we're talking about respiration, we're talking about chambers, we're talking about all sorts of different things that I never would have in a million years have expected to be part of my strength and conditioning journey. I left Quinnipiac University as an intern in the spring of 2012, I think. And I was under the impression that I was good to go. Like I thought it was literally, I had a real CrossFit mentality of just mental toughness, volume, and we're going to get through this. We're going to get through this together. And that's what's going to make you stronger. That's what's going to make you a better athlete. And boy, was I wrong. Now, I'm standing there, looking up at this mountain, and I'm thinking, holy crap, like I got to learn all of this stuff. And it just seemed so complex. And then I'm like, well, if this guy can't, adduct his femur, is he a visual patient? Is he an auditory patient? What, like, what are all of these things? And it was just so like wildly complicated in the beginning. And so what I did was I took the classes. I remember the first off season, I took the first 3 primary courses: myokinematic restoration, pelvic restoration, and postural respiration, and became a little bit more clear. And then I just kept going. I took course after course after course. And not only that, like I was really committed to learning it, because as far as I was concerned, there were a couple things at play. Number one, I was looking at PRI as my bachelor's degree. I had no background in science, and I was kind of looking at that as my foundation. So I was really building the foundation from there. On the flip side, I saw it as something that not a lot of people were doing, and I also saw it as something that was insanely effective and like wildly good at producing athletes in movement and results and pain-free movement. And it just made so much sense for me to just dive in. So not only was I taking the courses, but I would go back into the appendix and I would look at the books that created the course, the books that they used to create the course, and I would read those. I remember emailing the Institute and asking them, what are the books that you recommend to prepare for these courses? Because the higher up I got, as I progressed outside of the primary courses, we get into the weeds of, the visual system and like feet, just so many other things that you would never have expected. It just, the layers of complexity would just kept adding on and on and on. And I did this for years. I did this for at least 5 years, where I was just constantly taking the courses. I was, quite frankly, completely disinterested in any other course that was out on the market. And I just kept taking the courses. I went and got a license in massage therapy so I could do the manual techniques. I kept learning. I kept going into the appendix. I kept reading books. I kept, going off on my own tangents. And all of a sudden, I remember there was a point where I really felt that I had all of this kind of random knowledge about strength and conditioning and about the body and movement and all of these things. And I remember thinking like, okay, well, if somebody's right knee patellofemoral pain is starting to bark up, it's probably coming from the vastus lateralis on the right side, because that is a compensatory muscle. And having spent some time with that, like, it was a real bread and butter technique. And I had all these little things that I would do and that I had like knowledge, but it just seemed like all this random information that was inside of my head. And then I remember sitting at a course in Lincoln, Nebraska at the Institute. It was advanced integration. It was the only time I ever actually went to the advanced integration course. And all of a sudden, it was crazy. It was really, truly one of the few true epiphanies I've had in my life, where things just, it legitimately felt like puzzle pieces were clicking together. It was wild. And it just kept happening through, I think it was a 4-day course, and it just kept happening, and puzzle pieces and puzzle pieces and puzzle pieces. And I guess that's what the advanced integration course is all about, is to integrate all of the things together. And it just started happening. And when we go back to the metaphor of the young guy standing looking up at this mountain, like, I had been climbing this mountain for many, many years. And all of a sudden what happens is you get to something of a top, right? You get to the top of the mountain, and now you're standing up here with all of this information. The puzzle pieces are starting to click, but we keep going. So we start going down the mountain. And what I started finding as I started going down the mountain, I started realizing the mistakes that we make going up the mountain. I started realizing what really matters, right? I started looking at all of these things that I once thought was a really, really big deal, and started to realize that it's really not that big of a deal. This is one of the reasons I became so heavily engrossed in neurology, is because we spend so much time talking about training and all of these things. And I'm in the NBA with the world's greatest athletes, and these guys are not training nearly what most people think that they are. And it's not to say that they're not training, but clearly something else is at play here. And I started really putting the pieces together of the reality of athletics, athletic performance, training, strength and conditioning, rehab science. And I started realizing what really matters. And I get all the way down to the bottom of the mountain on the other side, and I realized the importance of simplicity and how simple everything really seems to me. When I get a PRI case in front of me, it just seems so simple. It seems so easy. It seems so cut and dry. And it's funny to me to think back to that guy who's on the other side of the mountain and thinking about how complex it is. You know, one of the things I've had the privilege of going out and assisting at PRI courses. And one of the things that I've noticed was that so many people try to scoot past the basics. They try to scoot past the things that really matter, like the pelvic tilt on the 90-90 and the positioning and maybe like a visual system, or maybe even just the presentation of the therapist or the trainer, or maybe even as simply put as the room that they are in or where this exercise is taking place. Like all of those little simple items, they're not checked. They can really genuinely make a huge difference on the training protocol. And they seem, and the newbies, the people on the other side of the mountain, the people who see it as such a complex science, they try to skip past that and they try to get to the sexy stuff and like get up to like the visual system and those things. And that's just not like, that's far too complicated. And what most people end up doing is they have procrastinated, they snoozed on mastering the basics, that they kind of use the higher echelon things as a crutch for why they actually never they never master, why they're not getting results here. They say, I'm not getting results here, this person must be a visual system patient, right? But the point of the story is to show you that there's two sides of the mountain. You go up and it seems super complicated. There seems like all these things that we have to think about. But on the other side, the people on the other side of the mountain are saying, it's simple. Trust your gut. Do the right things. Master the basics, right? And this is what leads me to what I really wanted to talk about, was from the business standpoint, guys, it's the exact same thing. So where you are, like first of all, identify where on the mountain that you are. Are you on the first part of the mountain, or are you coming back down on the other side? And if it feels really complicated and there's all of these things that need to happen and to occur, and I got to take care of all these things, my head's a mess, there's just literal chaos inside of my mind, well, then you're probably on the first side of the mountain. But what's really interesting, and I want each one of you to really consider this, is that when you start listening to the people who are on the other side of the mountain, who are walking down the mountain and no longer walking up, what do they tell you? When they give you advice, what do they tell you? Say, keep it simple. Trust your gut. You know, don't get complicated. Do one thing. But it's so hard to tell somebody who's ascending the mountain on the other side to keep it simple, to do one thing, that only a very few things matter. Visualize, be positive, have energy, eat well, work out, right? Like all of these super simple tasks are what these highly successful people are telling you to do. But it's so difficult to tell somebody on the climb that actually is the process that they should be following in order to get there. So I want you to think about that. And I want you to think about something in your life that you've mastered, and maybe not be the PRI world, but what is something that you've mastered in your life? Even think about riding a bike. If it's like that, think of all of the things you tried to think about when you were riding a bike the first time, and how now it seems so simple. You say, you just get on and you go, right? So what's something that you've mastered in your life? What's a skill, a hobby, a game that you've mastered that in the beginning just seemed overwhelming and complicated? And over time, you got to the peak and you started coming back down the mountain. And then things started getting really, really simple. So the reason I tell you this, the reason I look into my camera and I talk about the entrepreneurs, and I'm trying to speak to you, the entrepreneurs, is I want you to understand that there is another side to the mountain. Now, I'm not on the bottom. I feel like I'm walking down the mountain, at least in this stage, right? And I'm seeing things simplify before my eyes. I want you to understand that there's another side to the mountain where things are a lot simpler. And maybe, just maybe, it'll make you think, maybe, just maybe, you can take the shortcut and just go walk right over to the other side of the mountain. Forget the climb, just go right across. Take a bridge, take the skinny path along the mountain. I remember I was walking in Glacier National Park, and I was walking along the side of a mountain. It was the pathway must have been 2 feet wide. Take that path, walk right over there and just start simplifying it. You don't have to wait. One of the interesting things about my journey is that I have found that most of the struggle in entrepreneurship was working up the courage to just do the things that I always knew I had to do anyway. And the quicker looking back, I was like, man, I understand the process and I understand the challenge and the emotional challenges and all those things. But how nice would it have been if I could have just snapped my fingers and did it right away and just got here? Would have been a lot easier, right? And I want you to understand that pathway, wherever you are right now, wherever you're on the mountain, there's a path, there's a shortcut right to that spot, right to that spot. And we have to start listening to those people who are talking about the simplicity of it. You have to start listening to the people and think maybe they're actually telling you some incredibly sound advice. And when you look at everything that you've ever mastered in your life, isn't it safe to say that it started out really complicated and crazy and overwhelming? But you got to a tipping point where you started coming back down the mountain and it became very simple. Is there anything in life that you can name that has not gone in that fashion? Then what makes business any different? I really think that this podcast in particular, I really didn't set out for this podcast to be super profound. I actually sat down here before the podcast and I was kind of thinking about what the heck am I going to say here today that's helpful to people, and what am I working on that I always think about, and for me it's about just the process. It's about continuing. It's about the simplicity of it and making sure that I'm being a good leader and things like that, right? But what it's really about is it's about keeping it simple. It's about doing the right things. It's about amplifying my message. It's about being a servant to the people, to my customers, and all of those things, right? It's mastering the basics. It's listening to my gut. It's being who I am. I really believe it. I think this podcast can change some lives. I think somebody out there, if they really listen to it and take my advice, start thinking about tasks that they've mastered in the future and really see that mountain and see how now the mountains might get bigger, but the end result really typically remains the same. I'm sure if you talk to Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Bachelor Bill Gates, I'm sure if we talk to these guys, they would talk about the simplicity of business. And I know it's there. I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it right now. I need you to hop on that path and just walk over there, or just peek your head over there and take a look. See what it looks like. See what's possible. Don't be scared about it. It's possible. It's right there. Just take a look. Explore the opportunity at your fingertips. Guys, if this podcast gave you some value, please drop a comment, subscribe, tell your friends about it. This podcast is, I think it's like 35,000 downloads right now. And from the feedback that I get, it's really helping a lot of people out. And I want to be able to keep sharing that message. So please comment, please subscribe, please tell your friends. It'll be your good deed for the day. And as always, we will see you back here for the next episode of the Sean Light Podcast. Have a wonderful day, everybody.